Is there a version of getting what you wanted that still left you feeling like something was missing? Not ungrateful, just not quite satisfied. Like you reached the thing, you got the thing, and the thing was real, and you're glad that you have it. And also there's this background sense that you're expecting it to feel different than this. If that landed anywhere in your body just now, I want you to stay with me today. Because I think what I'm about to say is something that you've needed someone to say out loud for a while. Almost like a permission slip. Welcome back to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns. I'm Rachel J, and I want to say from the jump that this episode is a little different from the ones we've been doing lately. Less framework, less concept, more just sitting together in something real. Because sometimes the most important thing isn't the framework. Sometimes it's just naming the thing that's been living in the room with you, quiet and unacknowledged, or maybe acknowledged but hidden away for longer than you'd probably like to admit. And maybe it's something you would feel guilty about admitting, so yeah, you just don't. That's what we're doing today. Stick around. Throw out the rules, forget the cliches. This isn't about the perfect profile or the perfect date. It's about real connection. It's time to strip away the masks, shed the stories, and drop those old patterns that no longer serve you. Tired of dating advice that doesn't fit? So are we. Welcome to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns, where conscious dating isn't about following a script. It's about embracing your whole self and attracting the kind of love that sets your soul on fire. I'm Rachel J, the connection coach and your host. Let's get real. We've spent the last few episodes really looking at the patterns that run high-achieving men's love lives without their permission. The ways that gender conditioning shaped what you were taught to want, what you were taught to show, and what you were taught to keep hidden. And I've heard from a lot of you that those episodes hit close to home, which means that we're doing something right. But today I want to go one layer deeper, because there's a very specific feeling that comes up for a lot of men in your position. And it usually shows up first in the professional domain before it ever gets named as a relationship issue. It's the feeling of arriving, of getting the thing that you worked so hard for. The deal, the promotion, the apartment, the income, the lifestyle that used to be a goal and is now just, well, Tuesday. And there's a moment where you notice that the arrival of that thing didn't quite feel how you thought it was going to feel. Now, researchers actually have a name for this. It's the hedonic treadmill. The idea that we adapt to new levels of success or circumstance remarkably quickly, and that the baseline feeling of satisfaction returns to where it started, regardless of what we've accumulated. So even if you're still striving for those check marks on your goal list, you can recognize this anytime you've gotten a raise. You're stoked momentarily, but then that high wears off as the new income just becomes your set point, and you adjust your spending accordingly, because we always adapt to live within our means. And notice that I used the term set point here so that we make the connection back to the episode on thermostat theory. And if you missed that one, it's episode 29, and I encourage you to go back and listen. Essentially, though, it's describing the same effect as this hedonic treadmill. Whatever name you want to call it, there's nothing actually wrong with you for feeling this way. It's not ingratitude. It's not weakness. It's actually much more simple. It's just information. The hollow feeling after achievement isn't telling you that nothing will ever be enough. It's telling you that you've been trying to fill a relational need with an accomplishment. And accomplishments, however real and hard-won, will always fall short of that particular job. But here's where I want to go today that I don't think we've talked about enough, and honestly, I'm not sure enough people are talking about it at all. Because what happens when you get the relationship, the thing that you said you wanted, and you still feel hollow? Because you may be listening to this and are carrying that. Not so much the loneliness of being single, although you could certainly be carrying that too, but something quieter and in some ways more disorienting. The experience of being in relationship with someone, and maybe someone you genuinely love, maybe someone you chose carefully and deliberately, and yet still feeling unseen. Still sitting in the same fundamental loneliness, just now with company. And that one is harder to name because you're supposed to be grateful. You have what people tell you that you're supposed to want. And maybe you feel guilty or ashamed for feeling unsatisfied even after all that you've earned or accomplished or attracted. So you don't say anything. You manage it. You adapt to it the way you adapt to everything else, by making it work, by moving through the days with that quiet gap between you and the person sleeping next to you or sitting across from you at dinner, and telling yourself that this is probably just what long-term relationships feel like. Research consistently shows that men, far more than women, describe feeling valued primarily for what they provide rather than for who they actually are. What they do, what they earn, what they fix, what they contribute. Not their inner life, not the version of themselves that exists outside of function and output. And that's not a complaint about women, because this is genuinely not about that. What I want you to hear is a description of the cost of never having learned to show up as a full person in an intimate relationship. Because when the only version of yourself that you've been taught to offer is the capable, achieving, high-functioning version, then that's the only version a partner gets to see. And then you wonder why you don't feel truly known. You're not fully known because the part of you that most needs to be known has never been introduced. I'm going to be honest with you about something because I think it's relevant, and because I think that being honest with you matters more than maintaining, any kind of polished distance. I've spent a lot of time in my own life understanding what it means to be in relationship with someone, and still feel a particular ache of not feeling fully seen. And it's not because the love isn't real, it is. And it's not because I haven't shown up as fully myself from the get-go, but because two people can genuinely love each other and still be strangers to each other's interior worlds if neither of them has done the work to learn how to truly let someone in. Because honestly, you can show up fully yourself in early phases, but there's still going to be the shadow bits that you guard fiercely, telling yourself, if they knew this about me, would they still choose me? Being loved for the version of yourself you present to the world is not the same as being loved for who you actually are, shadow bits and all. And sometimes it takes being in relationship and being close to someone to really feel the difference between those two things. I'm not sharing that to make this about me, but because I think that a lot of what gets talked about in the dating space is oriented entirely toward getting the relationship, as if the relationship is the finish line. And just to bring in a little levity, I'm going to draw on my favorite show as an example, okay? Remember when Monica was screaming from the rooftops that she was engaged, and there was all this buildup about having the perfect wedding, right? Scenario A, okay, if you know, you know. And then the very next morning after the wedding, Monica was depressed, plopping herself down on the couch saying, I'm no longer a bride. Now I'm just somebody's wife. And what I've learned personally and professionally is that the relationship is actually where the real work begins and continues to unfold over time spent and trust built. And if you haven't done some of that work before you get there, well, then you can find your person and still end up lonely, which is, I'd argue, one of the loneliest feelings available to a human. And there's actually data to support this that I think is worth naming. It's kind of a PSA, if nothing else. Studies show that married men with children, not single people, report the highest levels of loneliness. Married men with children. Now, digging deeper into this is its own full episode, which I remember I at least touched on, if not fully excavated, in an early episode, episode 11, Cracks in the Concrete. So I encourage you to check that out. And if you listened to last week's episode on the performance tax that masculinity asks you to pay, this is where that cost fully lands. You can build the whole life, including the lifestyle, the partnership, and the family, and still be profoundly alone inside of it if the emotional infrastructure for real intimacy was never built. And I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because I think it reframes what the actual work is and why it matters so much to do it before you're already living inside the outcome that you are hoping to avoid and it feels too late to repair. Before you're experiencing just another Tuesday and feeling suppressed guilt or shame around still not feeling satisfied with your life despite all that you have. And then there's the other thing I want to speak to, which is the voice some of you have gotten very good at listening to. It's the voice that says, well, I've already tried this. I've already been in the relationship that didn't go the way I hoped. I've already felt the specific disappointment of investing in something and having it fall short. And that voice says, why would it be different this time? Why would I be different this time? I hear that. And I want to say that this particular voice is one of the most understandable responses a person can have to repeated relational disappointment. And it's not weakness. It's actually a very rational form of self-protection. Your nervous system learned something from what happened, and now it's trying to keep you from experiencing it again. But here is what I want to gently offer. The story that your past relationships were hollow, that the closeness you hoped for never quite materialized, that you gave real effort and still ended up on the outside of your own relationship looking in, that story is not evidence that connection isn't available to you. It's merely evidence that something in the way you were showing up, or in the way you were choosing, or in the internal wiring underneath both of those things needed something different than what you had access to at the time. The relationships weren't hollow because you're incapable of depth. They were hollow because you both walked in carrying armor that you didn't know how to take off. And hey, good news, armor, it can be taken off. Armor is a learned behavior, which means that it can be unlearned. I want to pause here just for a moment and invite you to check in with yourself, okay? Nothing formal, nothing you need to analyze. Just notice what's happening in your body right now as you've been listening. Is there something that feels true in what I've been saying today? Not intellectually interesting, but actually true. Like if it's describing something you've been living in without quite having the words for it. If so, I just want you to let yourself acknowledge that for a second. Not fix it, not figure out what to do about it. Just let it be true. Because the acknowledgement, the actual honest recognition of what's real for you, is the first movement, and everything else comes from there. Here's what I've come to believe after years of doing this work and after a lot of my own stumbling around in the same territory. The reason the inner work matters isn't just because it makes you better at dating. It's because it is the only thing that actually changes what you're available for. You can optimize your profile, you can work on your conversation skills, you can get clearer about what you're looking for on paper. And all of that does have value. But none of it touches the thing that actually determines whether the relationship you end up in feels like home or feels like a performance with better staging. What changes that is doing the deeper work of understanding the patterns that you were handed, the conditioning that shaped what you show and what you hide, the ways your nervous system learned to protect you that are now inadvertently keeping real intimacy at a distance. When that wiring shifts, everything shifts. The way you choose people changes. The way you show up changes. The way you receive love changes. And the person across the table from you, or the person you've been with for 3+ years, gets to meet a version of you that maybe they've been waiting for, and maybe you've been waiting for too. That is what magnetic is built around. It's not tactics, it's not scripts, it's not a better version of the same approach you've already tried. It is a 6-week process of doing the actual rewiring, gently, in your own time, with me in your corner the whole way through. If any part of this episode felt less like a podcast and more like a mirror, I'd really love for you to come take a look at it. There's more info in the show notes, and I want you to know that getting on that waiting list costs you nothing, but it means everything to that part of you who wants more from your relationships than what you've been getting so far. And if you're not quite ready for that, also in the show notes is something I made for you called the 5 minutes to magnetism. 5 minutes a day, that's it. Either done before a date or even just as a daily self-care practice. Either way, it is a real place to start. And I want to leave you with this. The version of you that's been quietly hoping that someone would finally see all of you, not just the capable, impressive, got it together version of you, but the whole person underneath it, that version is not asking for too much. He's not naive. He's not weak for wanting it. He's just been waiting for someone to tell him it's possible. So I'm telling you, it's possible. And the path there is not through someone else finding you and filling the gap. It's through you finally meeting yourself in it. I'm Rachel J, and this is Stripped, Drop Your Patterns. Just one more quick thing before I go. There won't be a new episode dropping next week, but I will be back the week after that, and I'm really looking forward to what's coming. In the kind time, this episode will be here waiting for you if you want to come back to it, or if you want to revisit the 2 earlier episodes I referenced today. Until we meet next, stay kind. Bye for now.